good sign that most of the crowd is actually networking because we came here for business. But we didn't want to, thank you, including some of our colleagues who are just walking around and making connections and really agreeing on opportunities. But James, thank you for being here as well. And James and I did want to sort of close off with a bit of a recap of why we're here and who we are as a group and what we can bring to the table to connect all the different pieces that we've heard about and to really seize the opportunity that just now Marcus and Laura and Shani were talking about. So I think by now you probably know more about what IDB Lab is as the innovation laboratory of the Inter-American Development Bank. Under the umbrella of the IDB, we work alongside the other two entities of the group, the public arm IDB and IDB Invest. Our specialization at IDB Lab is to take risk at an earlier stage, experimentation, open up new frontiers, looking at some of these new markets, accelerating new technologies to make it easier to be able to use them across the region so that people can, for example, on blockchain, using the network that we have been able to build with 50 partners in LACchain, are able to, in a much more seamless way, deploy their solutions. So accelerating new technologies, bringing up new solutions, putting in capital and taking risk at an earlier stage is what we do so that we can bring solutions that can really help poor and vulnerable people in the region. And we have the privilege of having here as well IDB Invest and James Scriven, its CEO, and some of the members of IDB Invest. And IDB Invest is the partner of choice in the region for the private sector. And their solutions come in at a growth stage and beyond. And so we have a continuum between IDB Lab and IDB Invest so that once companies reach a growth stage, they can partner up with IDB Invest and as the main arm of the group financing the private sector in the region from companies in many of the sectors that we've heard about in the last hours. With that, James, tell us a little more about what you see, what you've heard, and some of what's coming.
Thank you very much, Irene. It's always a real pleasure and always feel very welcome to the IDB Lab Forum. Always very welcome in Miami and always very overdressed when I come over here. It's not a joke, it's real. As we all know, in March 2020, the world really radically changed and our region experienced one of the worst crises in over 200 years. The pandemic was the ultimate test of the IDB group's ability to support the private sector. And as you heard from Irene, both IDB Lab and IDB Invest are here to support the private sector in its business to be able to support their growth. We're also convinced that this is a new opportunity, especially to build back better and not only think about how to go back to a previous part, but create a more sustainable, a more lasting, a long recovery that will be more greener and more inclusive. The crisis has highlighted a very big counter-cyclical role both of the public and the private sector will be addressing. And we're here to accelerate that, to not delay that crisis, and to make it more resilient to future economic growth, both created by the pandemic, but also created by the climate that we're living in. To support this progress, the IDB Group created with its new administration what is called Vision 2025. It's a plan to reinvest in the region to generate more, better jobs in the formal sector, and it includes 5 priorities that maximize effectiveness. 1, regional integration. As we all see, there's been a reconfiguration of the global value chains, and we are over here to support the establishment of value chains in our 26 member countries, Latin America and the Caribbean. 2, I think I'm preaching to the choir, digital economy. In our lifetime, we have never seen a tool that can accelerate development as a digital economy. I don't need to convince all of you. You probably are better than I to be able to talk about that. As we know, Latin America and the Caribbean were built on small and medium-sized enterprises. If you look economies like you have in Spain or Italy, it's based basically on SMEs, what is called SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprise. They control, or they have more than 7 to 80% of the jobs and create the products and services. So that's a big other target. Climate, the eternal pandemia. No place is closer to the effects of climate than is places like the Caribbean and Miami. But we are working towards to make a more resilient, mitigate and adapting the effects on climate. And last but not least, gender equality and diversity, making it a priority for the excluded people and the more vulnerable people to bear, that have bared the cost of health and education and the economic crisis, to be at the heart of it.
So these are some of the challenges, but of course we have the mentality of the what if and looking at the opportunity that can bring. And what we want to do more of, and even more after everything that we've heard today, is to provide even more additional financing, resource mobilization, and also the technical support and the connections that we can provide, that sometimes are even more important than the financing itself. So that's what between IDB Invest and IDB Lab we want to do. We want to innovate. We want to, of course, IDB Invest, which, by the way, just got the Latin Finance Award for the best multilateral of the year. So congratulations on that. And it is because they are able to manage very complex investments with innovative financing mechanisms. So we have a continuum from ideation to all the way to when the companies are already very mature. And we want to do this more and more through open partnerships. We want to democratize access to our resources, and this is again where we're here. We offer Latin America and Caribbean companies this continuum, and there are many examples, and actually most of them came out in very organically through the panels. We've heard, of course, a lot of what's happening in the fintech space, and we have an example of Cubo Financiero. Marcus just now was telling us about his vision for Mexico and what's happening there and the opportunities. And in the fintech space, Mexico is leading a lot of the upcoming unicorns. Cubo Financiero is one that really revolutionized the model for MSME and social investments. And early on, IDB Lab had provided $300,000 to Cubo Financiero, and then later on, in the form of a senior working capital loan of $2 million, IDB Lab continued to support its growth. And later on, IDB Invest made a $10 million quasi-equity investment in Cubo Financiero. And this was through a flexible mezzanine financial structure. So for all of you from funds, this is a great complement to the equity that you invest in these companies. And this deal also included an action plan to strengthen Cubo's corporate governance. So it is a whole package. Another example, again, logistics has come out a number of times in the discussions today. So Cargo X is a great example of that, because it's South America's largest trucking marketplace and online freight broker. You probably know it. It's based in Brazil, and it enables truck owner-operators to make use of excess capacity and avoid empty return trips. And it was an investment of IDB Lab very early on. It was in one of our portfolios. Marta Cruz is here from NXTP Labs. This was one of their picks, and we had invested in NXTP Lab and through $5 million in one of their first funds. And in 2020, IDB Invest provided directly to Cargo X $50 million. So this extension and this continuum, I think it's quite powerful. We want to hear from you. We want to partner more and complement the financing, the connections, and the support that you give startups and that you give companies along the spectrum. One final example, Merkeo. There are so many partners from Colombia at IDB Lab Forum. We haven't counted the nationalities yet, but I think it's probably one of the biggest nationalities represented at IDB Lab Forum this year. And Merkeo is a developer of online shopping platform, and it's designed to provide grocery items at reasonable prices. The main target population is lowest and lower middle income segments, and 40% of their sales are coming from really bottom of the pyramid population. It was one of our companies in the portfolio through Velum Partners, a Colombia-based VC fund, and then IDB Invest invested $10 million in their Series C round recently. So 3 examples. I hope they can give a good sense of the continuum.
Yes, and over here you've seen examples in many different areas in which we provide knowledge, financing, and connections. I can talk about the silver economy. I think it's quite obvious why. There's an aging population that requires financial services. We're currently one in every 8 people in the region are over 60 years old. I'm not there yet. But in 30 years, this will be double. And we do believe that the financial services and the work that can be done around areas of silver economy can have a long-lasting effect. IDB Invest, for instance, did an investment of $50 million in Caja Los Héroes in Chile that is a financing to expand financial services to senior citizens and today an unbanked population. Another example of what we've been able to do is thematic bonds. Our obsession is connecting development assets to impact investors, and the work that we do to be able to connect those is the reason why we exist as an institution. In the last, I would say, 2 years, we probably did over 30% of the thematic bonds in the market. They could be thematic bonds around gender, around social activities. We're very proud. I don't think we can announce it yet, so let's keep it in the room. I know that we just issued a blue bonds, the first one in Latin America, the 4th in the world, to be able to use those funds to invest in conservation of oceans, as an example. And we do believe that this is a big trend for all of us. Also, impact venturing. You know much better than I, in Latin America, only 60% of the largest companies are corporate venture mechanism, and it's over 75% in the Fortune 100. So when we work in the context of a network of corporates to be able to invest in innovation, this is a good example of how we work together.
And thank you to Gemma Sacristan, who is working with us at IDB Invest, and I think this is a line of business, corporate impact venturing, where Micaela Cordero, our colleague from IDB Lab, with many of the partners that are here, is starting an open platform on corporate impact venturing so that we don't reinvent the wheel, so that we can collaborate and capitalize on this platform, and not every corporate has to do it on its own. And I think it's a great line of business for IDB Invest as well to continue later on.
Another example, there's a concept called blended finance, where we use concessional funds to be able to accelerate change. We use it highly in climate change, and we use it highly in diversity and inclusion. Some of the examples that are people that are in the audience today. Ejido Verde in Mexico. We did also Cajay in Chile. These are examples of where we were able to combine both IDB Lab and IDB Invest through blended finance to be able to expand. ENGIE in Chile is a good example also, where we use concessional finance to close fossil fuel plants and to be able to use those proceeds to invest in solar and wind farms. These are good examples of how we've been able to use these blended finance.
And some examples of digital infrastructure, because we talk a lot about the digital solutions, and but we also want to make sure that we are keeping up with the gaps in the infrastructure itself, so that these are scalable and they can scale up. And we also had a chance to hear. So I mentioned how we are accelerating the adoption and the availability, the ease of use of blockchain as as a technology that is the Internet of Value, and that more and more becomes just mainstream, and it becomes something that is just embedded in so many solutions. We heard the pitch of the company Moeda, right? And it was a fantastic pitch from this company that is really addressing financial inclusion, already reaching 6,000 women in Brazil. And guess what? It is already leapfrogging and built on blockchain. So what we've done, but in this case is so that companies don't have to, again, reinvent the wheel. We've created an alliance called LACchain, where more than 50 partners have already come together, from Consensus to many corporates and Citibank and others, to make this publicly permissioned network open, free to be used to anyone. So an Internet of Value, really, where anybody can deploy their solutions based on digital IDs, digital credentials, and eventually also being able to transact with digital currencies. And for those interested, on the 28th, it started at 11:30. There's going to be a workshop to really know how to use it, how to become a part of and be able to deploy solutions on it. But we also heard of a lot about AI, not surprisingly, and how it's become, again, a technology that is pretty much being used. Sometimes there is a bit of AI washing, so people who say they use it, but it's not really being used. But when it's really being used, we need to ask, do you really need to use it? And if you really need to use it, then how to use it in a way that gives us the confidence that it's been done ethically, that it's been done with the transparency and the accountability standards that we I expect as investors, and that every investor in the room also would want to see. And that's how FairLAC came about. Again, a network of partners representing different sides of industry coming together, and together with the entrepreneurs, developing tools to make the application of this self-diagnostic and the improvements that this self-diagnostic throws out after into the business model. And we want to just finish, I think, by thank you all, but before James, maybe a couple more words on.
Yes, I do want to say that as development institutions, we're here to take more risk. The risk can take various forms, but we're over here to be able to solve the development challenges that we face in Latin America and the Caribbean. And this is why we have three large institutions. We got the public sector, we got the private sector that we're working with direct clients, and we got the Innovation Lab. This continuum that exists is, we feel that because of this can be the gain decade of Latin America and the Caribbean.
Yeah, so I think this is been great to be with you in person. I think for so many, the first time in an event in person, and I think we're also eager to be back and have this opportunity. Thank you for being here. Thank you to all our partners, and let's do business. Let's connect. We want to hear from you and continue to make connections that make more of these great things happen. Y gracias, James. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Have a great evening.